then we can just stop talking. We can just stop talking. Secondly, the World Bank is an option, but it feels like we're being presented as is this the only option. If the World Bank is the only option, fine. I mean, there is a huge power difference in our negotiations here, and AOCs, we understand and we respect that. So if that is the only option on the table, let us please not pretend that we are negotiating it. We don't need to come into the TC for us to go off, the shareholders of the bank to go off and form a fifth. We don't need to be there. But please, I mean, it's really important to me in my seat that it does not give an impression that we negotiated and we settled on that. So we don't want it to be seen that way. AOC's countries were wide open to any idea that sounded that we can host a really good, excuse my language, kick-ass fund that all of us decided on. Because AOC's countries don't have the expertise of developed countries, we don't have the expertise of some African countries with drought, and you don't have the expertise that we have with sea level rise, and I know the Netherlands have great expertise with those things. And what we were hoping for is a fund with the arrangements that can help us do what we're doing now on our own a little bit better and do it together. But if the World Bank is an option that is not negotiable, then stop negotiating it. Okay, I mean, let us stop pretending, co-chairs, that we are negotiating it. And we don't need to talk about it here for the developed countries to go to Washington and form the fund. You don't need us. You don't need COP for that. So if it's not negotiable, take it off the table. Now I'm going back to the COP decisions. And it says, establishing institutional 5A, institutional arrangements, modality, structure, governance, and terms of reference for the fund. Right, so establishing institutional arrangement is a fait accompli. It did not say establish an institutional arrangement at the World Bank. So my assumption is that we have options. We talked to the bank, we talked to the IFIs, minister spoke to them, and yesterday was the only day we got a chance to actually have a conversation with the World Bank. So if you're going to give us the World Bank, let's have a conversation with them. We need to, when we are setting, what my expectation of both of you, please note it's not a criticism, please, you're my friends, is that if we're going to have a hosting institution, we need to know how much does it cost, what is the value for money, what are the things you can do with the entity, what is the value-added proposition of using different entities. We didn't really get that until yesterday. And I'm not understanding the fees that the World Bank presented, but, and I'm open to hear more, but to say that 17% hosting fee, it means that the biggest beneficiary of this fund will be the World Bank. The 10,000 employees of the World Bank will get more money from this fund than the 63 million people of the population of AOC's countries. I'm not sure about you, but I have a problem with that. I know that problem in my mind can be overcome if we can talk about it. But we're not talking about it because it's not for negotiation. So take it off the table. Let's not discuss institutional arrangement because we're not negotiating. Please let it be known that it's the decision of the developed countries. It's not a TC decision. Then we go back to COP and we get a reset of our guidance. The other issue is that the COP said to us, 5C, identifying and expanding sources of funding. There is no way that we can sell the idea to any other potential donor. Remember, things evolve. Where we are with respect to donation and stuff like that, and contributor base could expand 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. There is absolutely no way that if one of our AOC's countries could probably contribute, that we will be writing a check to an institution where we have to pay a 15% fee. No way anybody will do that. And this is why, maybe, call me crazy, is why you cannot expand the contributor base, because we're putting it into an entity that is not competitive. If you talk to your own taxpayers, and our ministers and you show the breakdown of the fee, they will be very much concerned about it. This is assumption. I still have to get the figures, so I'm still open-minded here. If we want to attract funding from the private sector, if we want to attract funding from other donors, we have to put it into an arrangement that is competitive and we're not wasting money. We looked at the fifths that the World Bank have, and the largest fifth that they have is the one where they're only the trustee. AOSIS is happy. We didn't like the way we did it with the GCF fund. Right up front, we want the trustee to be the World Bank. We want to make that very clear. That's within G77 and China, I think that is the position. And for AOSIS, whether or not it was a G77 and China position or not, that will be our position, a very strong position. So going back to what are we doing here? If we're not able to negotiate, if we have no say in where the fund is structured, please, co-chairs, tell us that. And then take it off the table. We AOCs do not want to make it seem like we are participating in any negotiation where we just have no say. And that is not what we came here to do. Let us put that aside. Let's design a fund that will meet what our objectives would be, that will attract other donors, because that is required. It allows us to engage a small and a developing state, and then we move on. And I want to point out something. We hear that the bank is changing, and there's no doubt in our mind that that will happen. But we listened carefully to the president of the bank just last week, and we're going to be paying 15% to 17% for hosting. Yet the bank is inefficient. It's super slow. And, and you're saying to us, use this bank because we're going to be able to change it. And trust me, that's going to happen. We know what happened with the CIF. We all agree that it had a sunset clause. The Green Climate Fund was formed, and it was never sunset. It's still operating. And we know that the CIF provided, it was supposed to be money for adaptation, provided a lot of loans to countries. So we don't want to create another fund that is going to jack up the debt, which is an unintended consequence, would be to jack up the debt, which I know is what the culture of the World Bank, that is what they're going to do. Okay, so if that is what we're going to end up with, really and truly, for smaller and developing states, we have nothing to lose here. But let us not go back to the terms of reference and the mandate that was provided to us by the COP. As co-chairs, see if we strayed from it, and then we'll go for it. We didn't come here to design. We're happy to design a fund. If we got the mandate, TC, go and design a fund that will suit the World Bank. We're here, we're going to engage. But that's not the mandate that we got. And I'm afraid that is the mandate that we're engaging in. So I'm a little concerned about that. And I want to know, before we go text by text on line, what are we doing here? Because I'm not going to be going through, I'm not prepared for a text by text negotiation if the result of that is to design a fund for the World Bank. If that is the case, I have to go back to AOSIS, I have to go back to the ministers, and if that's the case, take it to the ministers. And when you take it to the ministers, co-chairs, you have to tell the ministers what is the cost of engaging with the World Bank. Now, finally, I don't know how much time I'll get the floor, if we have to go with the World Bank, Uti and Richard, we should not be paying anybody more for hosting than we pay for the GCF. The GCF should be our benchmark, and that is the most that we will pay. Paying 17% is highway robbery. That's just pure gangster behavior. Right? How can you have so much power that you can command that much fee? Please, a small line like us will have no chance against such a powerful institution. And I don't want to put our people up against all of that. Right? So I just want you to reset, tell us what we're doing so we can be clear and we can engage in an appropriate way. Because I'm coming here as a negotiator to see that we can negotiate. I hear great things from everybody that we can use, but I want to just make sure that that is my understanding. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Diane, and I see JC's flag is up. I'll give him the floor in a minute, but perhaps to provide a reassurance on behalf of the co-chairs that indeed we are very focused on making sure that we deliver on, that we respect the mandate from Sharm and that we deliver on all aspects of the mandate. And clearly, certainly from my point of view, very much support the fact that we should not be focusing on the location. We should be focusing on what is it that we want this fund to deliver. How do we make sure that the fund really delivers for the particularly vulnerable? How do we operationalize it? We're looking at, and how do we make sure that it also delivers on the modalities that the particularly vulnerable need. So certainly, at least from the co-chair's side, we really have an open mind. Also, very much welcome your statement that it has to be that form follows functions. That there are no sort of preset, predetermined ideas. Certainly not from this side in terms of how this would land. JC, please.
Thank you, Uti. Well, we have been knowing each other, Diane, for 2 years, actually, at the GCF board first, and then now for a few months at the TC, other TC members, colleagues. I have to say that this is probably the first time in 2 years that I have to disagree with one of the points you just made. Not all of them, actually. I would probably agree with most of the other ones. But the point you made about the World Bank, it's just not true from my perspective. There is nothing in, for instance, the EU submissions that you have probably gone through that is in any way related to the location of the fund at the World Bank. If we decide to go for a standalone fund, we will have the same set of recommendations. And I will be the first to make sure that the location at the World Bank wouldn't prevent this fund and the funding arrangement working with this fund to deliver on the recommendations we want to propose to the COP. That has to be very clear. That's completely unrelated. And as a matter of fact, I was one of the colleagues around this table to propose a way forward in order to let the future board decide whether or not the constraints of the location at the World Bank are in any way impeding the work of the fund as we want it to work. So it has to be clear that the location at the World Bank is in any way related to the set of recommendations we want to send to the COP. But I don't know if we want this fund to kick us. Maybe, actually. That's something I may, in a way, agree with you, actually. We have seen huge gaps in the current architecture that has to be fixed, and maybe we need to kick some asses in order to do that. No problem with your statement on that. But what is for sure is that I want this fund to kickstart its activities as soon as possible. And the only way I see it able to do it is with a location in a current institution, and the World Bank seems to me the most appropriate at this stage. So my proposal last Tuesday was related to kickstart the activities of the fund in the World Bank, let the board of this new institution double-check in implementing its program, its activities, that it is not a problem to be located in the World Bank. with a set of conditions that we can put to that location, and then let the board decide whether or not it is good to continue to be located at the World Bank, or to choose and to organize a transition to another institutional location. Now, and I can be a little bit more long on that, but I will stop there. Now, on the 17%, I'm afraid there is a misunderstanding, a huge misunderstanding there. So I really ask the co-chair to clarify that with the World Bank. I see them nodding approvingly to my statement. There is no comparison between the 6% of fees for the GCF, for instance, and the 17% mentioned by our colleagues from the World Bank yesterday. There is no comparison. So, I mean, let's clarify that in order for you then to be more comfortable with that. And I would understand, actually, if it was the case, if it were the case, I would completely understand that, and I wouldn't be in favor of the World Bank in this case, actually. So, but it's not the case. It's not the case. The fees of the World Bank, it has been said, are probably one of the lowest on the market of hosting activities. So that has to be clear. Now, and that will be my final point, Uti. I am quite eager to engage with colleagues on the way forward to find an outcome. So here again, I would agree with Diane. We have to find a process in order for the members, colleagues to engage. I'm not sure that we have to go through again all the outstanding issues one by one. I would love to have something to discuss constructively with each other. Today, we have two days left, and you know, for me that will be more than a disappointment. That will be a nightmare that we won't get an outcome at the end of these 2 days. So, let us do what we have to do, which is to engage on real compromise. I do recognize that we have some differences of views in some points. I do understand also that there may be compromise to be found in, in trading some ideas to make ourselves comfortable in some part and happy in other parts. We're not going to be happy in every issue, that's for sure, because we have differences, that's obvious. But if we can be comfortable in some and happy with others, well, that's perfect to me. I'm happy to be comfortable, and I will be comfortable with some happiness in some other points. So, if I may ask co-chair to find a way, a process to do that, and I'd be happy for them to take, responsibilities and propose text of compromise, and let us work on this text. So, and other ways can be done. We're happy to discuss in small group as well, if you want us to do so. But let's find a process to use these 2 days in a very productive way.
Thank you very much, JC. And if at all possible, I'd really like to avoid another round on the location, because I do think that there are sort of issues for clarification, and perhaps we can ask the World Bank to clarify some of those later today. And we would like to really sort of at this session to have a good discussion on issues that will need to be resolved irrespective of where the fund is housed. But let's see how far we get. Christina, please.
Thank you, Uti, and thank you, Diane and JC. I just want to support a lot of what JC said in terms of willingness to be here, and just to respond to Diane, how you started, which is, are we here to work together? I think you used the word negotiate. I would say kind of in the spirit of the way you started on day one, I think we're all here with the intention to work together and find those areas of compromise and ways forward. I agree with you in terms of, I woke up this morning and it's day 3 and wondering sort of how we spent yesterday and whether that was the best way to spend our time, because the last time we were really together in a room having a conversation on this issue of location, I thought there was a spirit of trying to further understand each other and the various positions. And then we went into and then we were all gone from each other. So I'm just a little not sure what happened from that first day. I know what happened, but like to come here and make the case that we're not here to negotiate, or that developed countries have this immovable position and aren't here to negotiate. I just want to say that at least for this seat in the United States, we are here. The idea is we have 2 days left to complete our work and to come out with a complete package, and that is still our hope. And to do that, we need to be having these conversations. So Diane, thank you for raising it. I do think we need to, at your hands, our co-chairs, to figure out the best way to do that. And if that's here in the room, going line by line, we're supportive. If it's putting ourselves in your hands, the co-chairs support that as well. With respect to sort of, if there has been a progression for the United States in terms of from TC1 to TC2 to TC3 and how we've evolved our thinking. And so I would disagree with the impression that this was a fixed, when the U.S., because the U.S. put forward in our submission in TC3 that our preference would be that this is the location of the Secretariat is housed at the World Bank as a fifth. I mean, that was an evolution from conversations that we had as a group from TC1 through TC2. I think we were pretty clear that in our sort of thinking through what is it we're hearing from vulnerable developing countries of what is needed, things like a fund with global presence, the ability to work with easily with developing countries that are particularly vulnerable, recognizing also what you said, Diane, in terms of institutions that have had a history where that has not been as easy, but wanting a fund that could be set up quickly and could be quickly dispersing funds, a wide range of tools, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we went into TC2 expressing that we, for all of these reasons, we felt it was better to house it at an existing institution. We were open to a variety of different institutions, but we felt by TC3 we needed to pick a horse, right? That there just isn't enough time to keep wondering which one. So we picked our horse based on the analysis of what is it we're hearing is needed. So this wasn't a sort of coming into it predetermining something. This was from an evolution of this last year. And that's where we landed as of TC3, and it's where we landed when we came here at day one of TC4 as we shared in that conversation. I think there's more discussion to be had. I would agree with JC's point about, I think, a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication about the fees, which we should clarify. But I also want to say that I have also been disappointed with the fact that we've spent 2 days now talking about this one issue. And if there's a way that we can move on to some other issues, maybe park this one and come back, we would be quite supportive. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Christina. Let me just consult with my co-chairs to where do we go from here. Okay, colleagues. We're getting the Secretariat set up for line-by-line negotiations as requested by a number of TC members, against the advice of some of the co-chairs, but again, but against the advice of both co-chairs, but because we are really at the service of the committee, this is what we're going to do. So I'm going to walk you through what we're going to do now. So you should look for document TC4/2023/5. So I'll give you a moment to find that. Also known as a document with loads of numbers, so it's got numbers by each of the rows. And on that document, we would ask you to take up, go to page 10, which starts Terms of Reference Governing Instrument. And the Secretariat will also put this up on the screen. It's always easier to engage on very constructive line-by-line negotiations when you can actually see it on the screen and you can start bracketing everything as you usually do. We heard again this morning the views related to the location of the Secretariat and the fund. We recognize how incredibly important that issue is. However, Richard and I feel very strongly that we should not start with that issue because we've had a number of discussions on that. It doesn't mean that we're not going to consider it. We will come back to it. So, but with the exception of the location of the Secretariat and the fund, we will try to go through it issue by issue. So again, we're looking at the document TC4/2023/5. On page 10, it starts the Terms of Reference / Governing Instrument, and the first issue there is legal status. And on legal status, we have captured two proposals, and we would welcome your views on those, and especially if there's a way to either, and would welcome also whether if you could signal flexibility on going along with one or the other, or if indeed, given that this is now the third day of our meeting, you've had a lot of time to have productive discussions on the side with your TC member colleagues. If you have a bridging proposal to propose, or if you think you can develop a bridging proposal but you can't come up with one right now, that would also be the thing to signal to us. So the floor is open. Mo, please.
Thank you so much, and that's very clear from our side. It's option 1, and it is the language that says the fund to enjoy. This is a very ambiguous language, and it's not very clear for us how and how is this process going to happen. Very clear language is that the fund is, as we are creating it, is under international law, and it shall, or even it will possess international legal personality. And then the rest, I think, is similar. I have a concern with this very ambiguous language when it comes to legal status, and the language that says to enjoy does not help the cause. From our point of view, it's very clear that it is a will, and we need to move forward from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mo. And again, we're now sort of entering into a mode of work that perhaps not all were expecting or didn't that to be the thing to do this morning. So I'll give you a few minutes also to consult and reflect, and the floor is open. David, please.
Thanks.
Followed by Avi.
Thanks, Uti. And just to confirm your assessment, this is not how I expected to be spending my time right now. I wonder whether it might be possible to ask the TSU to provide some advice just on where this is derived from and set out the points of difference. Mo articulated some concerns that he has, which are, of course, reasonable. Just some context would be helpful, particularly given this is specifically on legal matters. I wonder if there's somebody from our support team who could help. Thanks.
Thank you, David. We'll ask a lawyer to join us here to answer, to provide some of the background. Avi, please.
Thank you, Uti. I am not a legal expert, but in my background in finance, I do think that if we want this fund to be very flexible and be able to leverage its resources and do many things and partnerships, then we need to have clarity and certainty around its legal status. And that's why I would support Proposal 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Avi. Christina, followed by Angela.
So I was not prepared to do this, and none of my computers are working. Hopefully they will as we proceed. Neither of these options, actually, or these two proposals, are possible for us. They're not possible, according to public international law. We have some language. If this is for the option of a standalone fund, would you like me to? If we're really doing line by line, should I be reading you? Cool. So in the standalone option, this legal status proposal would be the fund secretariat and the host state may or are to conclude a headquarters agreement. The fund is to enjoy legal capacity in the territory of the host state and be granted such privileges and immunities by the host state as are necessary for the exercise of its functions. And then in the option where this is where we have our option with the World Bank hosting this as a fifth, the language would be the World Bank is to be invited to serve as the trustee of and provide secretariat services to the fund, and in this role is to serve in a fiduciary and administrative capacity and is to perform that role in accordance with its articles of agreement, bylaws, rules, and decisions. As a fund of the World Bank, the privileges and immunities accorded to the World Bank under its articles of agreement will apply to the property, assets, activities, income, operations, and transactions of the fund. I'm happy to send this language to the Secretariat so that they can include this in our line-by-line negotiations here.
Thank you, Christina. Angela, followed by Mateusz.
Thank you very much, Uti. I just want to support the comments made by Ambassador Mo and Avinash. So we think that it's important to have some clarity in terms of the legal status. And we think that the international legal personality is very key. So we fully support Proposal 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Mateusz, followed by, and again, I can't see, is Diane. Diane, yes, please.
Thank you very much, Uti, and good morning, colleagues. First of all, let me throw our support behind what Mohammed, Avi, and just recently Angela mentioned on the importance of agreeing on a legal and clear status for the fund that we're going to establish. As the previous speakers, I'm not a lawyer specifically, nor my delegation has, as the U.S. does, huge legal advice. But we would pretty much support Proposal 1, which between the two proposals provide us with more clarity when it comes to the fund possessing international legal personality. A quick and a very perhaps superficial reaction to what I've just heard from our U.S. colleagues, and I think we do need to have that reflected for us to really engage in writing. My question would be, how is this language, especially for Proposal 1, which is this new entity that developing countries are putting forward for the Loss and Damage Fund, different from the mandate of the GCF? Because I just have the GCF language in front of me, and it literally says that the board is going to go through arrangements with the host country and ensure that juridical personality and legal capacity are conferred to the fund. One of the major concerns of my delegation is that we do not fall into the same category and situation of the GCF, which limits basically its capacity to really, as Avinash was saying, to really scale the fund's resources because of the legal capacity constraints that it has. So this is the rationale that we all should be having when we approach this legal status, and at least that we would be willing to basically to build from the lessons learned of the vertical funds that we now have for climate change, and really get this fund the legal status that it needs to really achieve its goals. But thank you.
Thank you, Mateus. Next, I have Diane, followed by Adele.
Thank you. So I'm with David. I'm reading both, but I'm not understanding in practice what this does mean in practice. I must say I thank Christina for the language that she provided, because it's more along the lines of what we're accustomed to. Now, with respect to the language of the independent, the first one that's provided by her is the same that we use for the Green Climate Fund. And we know the issues that they have with privileges and immunities, which within our group, we have a difference in terms of why we're not getting it done. I think the GCF could do more. But I think in the terms of understanding the difference, I understand the difference, and Christina outlined it too, but I don't really understand the difference here. That could just be because I'm not a lawyer. But if we can get text that can articulate the differences, then I think we can make a better understanding of what we can do. I think the GCF could go about privilege and immunities a little bit differently, and definitely this fund could do this, can upfront do that as well, if it's an independent standalone fund. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Diane. Next, I have Adele. 200 from David. Again, and before you, I have asked the Secretariat to get a lawyer to answer the questions right now. I'm sure that they are frantically looking for a lawyer right now, and as soon as we get one in the room, we'll get that. But David, 200.
Thanks, Uti, and frankly speaking, I can see one from where I'm sitting, so I'm not quite sure why that's a challenge. But just to go back to the essence of the point I was making, I think this conversation is an important one, and it's about making sure that we have the same objective, and then how that objective is then translated into the legal status of the fund. That is a conversation I'm very keen to have, but I'd like to have it, if we can, starting from a position of shared, or at least an attempt to have shared understanding. And I'm concerned that we'll spend a long time talking across purposes, because, I understand what Mateus has just described, and that in my mind is in part why a World Bank FIF would make a lot of sense, because you then adopt the elements of the bank that give you the access that was such a problem with respect to the GCF. But I don't think that's what we're talking about. And I'd like us to get on the same page if we could. So if that means we defer this to a later point, that would be fine, of course. And it's for you guys to run the meeting. But I feel we're going to go around in circles. But I do note that there is now a lawyer to your shoulder, so maybe that will help.
Okay, thanks. Let's still get Adele, Heike, and Sumaya, and then we'll throw the lawyer under the bus. So, Adele, just figuratively, of course. Adele, please.
Thank you very much, Uti. Good morning, colleagues. I'm very happy to see you all around this table instead of yesterday's conditions. So let us go together. We are fully mandated by the Conference of Parties to solve the issues. So once again, this is very good time for us to exchange views among us to come up with a solution. In terms of proposal before us, I think international legal personality is key, at least for us. So I would like to support views expressed by more support by others from developing countries. In terms of proposal that was made by Christina before me, I think Christina just developed some views from proposal 2, and before the fund to enjoy, there was some language there, and then continue with fund to enjoy. To enjoy means something's already there, and the fund is going to enjoy. But for us, we need to create legal personality for this fund. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adele. Next, Heike, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I must admit, as I struggle as colleagues do, not being a lawyer, but also not being perfectly sure how this gets us closer to our joint objective, at least what I heard at the beginning of the meeting, or our joint urge and willingness to make progress on the substance that we are here for. But so I try nevertheless my bit. So what I understand also from lawyers is that we fully acknowledge that we have to have a fund that has the capacity and the status to fulfill all its functions. And that is, I mean, talking about what we want and need. I think I heard also Diane speaking to it, like the core, and we agree. But that from a legal perspective, and apparently we all, or most of us, have been going through it several times, like the first sentence of Proposal 1 is legally not possible. So that within our process, we create an international legal personality. And this is why option 2, from a legal point, is our preferred option, while fully acknowledging, as far as I understand, our joint objective to have really all the functions and capacities in this fund to do its job.
Thank you, Heike. Sumaya, did you wish to take the floor?
Yeah, thank you so much. I guess I agree. Also, this is after saying good morning. I would like to agree with the statement made by my colleague Mo and the other colleagues that the clear language will just give us the assurance that we want the fund to have the legal personality. And I guess just a quick response before seeing the full proposal from my colleague Christina is that I think that formulation will prejudge the outcome of the host. So I think we just need to move slowly and working on the legal status language, and but this is how I feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumaya. Still have Ali and then Mo, and then it's to Raj to answer.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. First of all, I thank you for kickstarting this discussion. And since we have next 2 days, we're very hopeful that we'll be able to conclude our negotiations in time, and we'll be able to send a document having all recommendations to the COB and CMA. As far as this point is concerned, I put my support behind all developing country colleagues that in our understanding as well, the legal personality is one of the most important thing which Pakistan needs for this fund and its support to have. Because we think that the fund and its board should have ability to enter into contracts and discharge all their functions independent of their host organization. We know there is another option available on table where the legal personality will not be granted to the board, and another organization will be signing all the contracts on behalf of the fund. That, in our understanding, will take away the independence of the board and the fund. In that context, we are very supportive of this idea of granting legal personality to the board at least and the fund. And another thing which I mentioned yesterday, that we want the board to negotiate with the hosting organization the MOU or the hosting agreement. For that, we need the board to have a legal personality to enter into that contract. So in that context, again, I'm supportive of this idea that the board and the fund should have the legal personality, and so far I've failed to understand that what are the arguments against granting that legal personality to the board. Since we have an example adaptation fund board where we have in past granted the legal status to the board, and it enters into contracts with implementing entities, then when I see here the discussion, or listen to the discussion that it is not legally possible, then we do have a precedence. Thank you.
Okay, back to my list of speakers. I have Mo, followed by Haja, followed by Jaime, and then we'll get some answers. And we really want to then move to the next issue, because kind of getting the sense that we may be just going around in circles, and I think the end result may be that we are as confused as we were at the start, but we may be confused at a higher level, and I don't think that's beneficial at this stage. Mo, please.
Thank you so much. And very quick, for colleagues who have mentioned that we didn't do that before, they can read the governing instrument of the Green Climate Fund, where those parties were sitting and agreeing, and it is very clear under the legal status, which is different than the decision that operationalizes things. It says that the fund, to operate effectively at international level, it has the juridical personality and the legal capacity. So you have two elements. One is the capacity, and the other one is the personality. And as was mentioned by Ali, I mean, capacity is limited. Personality gives the ability to this fund to really expand and mobilize and take all the actions that we have been talking about. But the language that you had in the two options, our concern was mainly that first one is clear. The second one was like to enjoy is very ambiguous, which doesn't have anything on timeline. And so there is an agreement between both of them that there will be legal capacity and international personality. This is our understanding. The difference was yes, or the other one, inshallah, as we say in Egypt. It's like, let's hope it will have that, which doesn't work with us. So we stick to the first option. For the proposals by Christina on those ones, it is very interesting that now we are asking countries to go into contractual agreements and work with the fund, and then this is a very long process that we have seen before that doesn't really reflect the urgency that we are talking about. And then the World Bank option, this is like, again, as we said and as we heard yesterday, it is asking the World Bank to do everything for us. We just like ask them, please, let's have a fifth. And then the World Bank is going to do everything on our behalf, which is the two proposals by the US is not acceptable, which is proposal 3. For us, it stays as option 1, and we'll be listening from the legal team also on the difference on the legal capacity versus the personality. Thank you.
Thanks, Mo. Next, Haja, please.
Thank you, and good morning, colleagues. First, let me add that I'm glad we're in negotiation mode and having conversations here. And I just wanted to add my support to the spirit of option 1. We need the legal capacity to do its work. And for us, part of the work is to be able to leverage and reach scale so that we actually be able to function. The most vulnerable countries of us are able to survive and thrive in the 1.5 degree and beyond. And so in that spirit, I just wanted to support the option 1, and I'm looking forward to hear from the legal opinions on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Haja. Jaime, followed by Manjit.
Thank you very much, and again, also happy that we're getting into to the nitty-gritty of it. Now, I would love to hear from the lawyer exactly what Mo has said, clarity on what we're actually discussing here, the legal personality and the capacity. On the capacity, I think we all agree that, of course, it needs to be an independent sort of function, regardless of which host, where it's hosted. But also, I think the part of the discussion, if once we get clarity, should be postponed until we know what the host is, and then have a functional discussion to move forward, not just a principled one. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jaime. And Manjit as the last speaker.
Thank you, Iti. Good morning. Since I'm taking this floor for the first time, taking the interim seat of the board, just want to share with you all that I accepted this role hoping that you all will finish everything and I will come here to celebrate. We know where we are. But I think I also appreciate all, like, in terms of where we were, and then I think maybe in the UNFCCC process, maybe this is the first time, like, in 1 year, the in-depth, the work, the tremendous work that has been done, unpacking, and then I think taking us to this level, and I really hope this spirit will continue in the coming 2 days and we deliver on the mandate. Finally, in terms of the option that we have in front of us, I think it's a legal matter, but also I think it's also being pragmatic. Yes, we will hear from the legal team, but what are we really hoping to do without having a legal personality? And then also, I think if we follow the precedent that we have set in this process, establishing the Adaptation Fund, the Green Climate Fund, I think that's how we should continue. So yeah, we in that context, we support option 1 with all the other developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I turn to Raj to clarify issues, including on the issue of international legal personality. Again, as an economist, I don't see what the word enjoy has got to do with any of what we are now discussing, but that's another issue. Raj, you have the floor.
Thank you, co-chairs, and thank you to the member from Australia for the kind invitation, and thank you for the questions. It's a complex area, and I'll try my best to clarify what I can at this stage, and happy to continue that discussion perhaps offline, which I think may be more productive to allow members to move on to some other issues. I think to come to the question of can we put language, can parties put language in the governing instrument, I think the answer to that must be yes. Not only have the parties done that before in the context of the GCF, paragraph 7 and 8 of the governing instrument, the general view is that COP decisions in themselves will not grant the international legal personality or the legal capacity to the fund, nor will they provide themselves the privileges and immunities. And so the statement in the governing instrument is the expectation that this is what will be the case with respect to the fund. And we can obviously differentiate between the fund as a standalone institution and the legal status and privileges and immunities that would be inherited were it to be hosted in an existing institution. And so from that point of view, my personal legal view is I don't think that there is an issue with the acceptability of any of the proposals that are on the table. It's a question of ultimately how parties wish to articulate the status and privileges that are expected of the fund. With respect to the GCF, for example, where we had very similar language to Proposal 1, not quite the same, but very similar language, the actual international legal personality and the first set of privileges and immunities under public international law were conferred upon the signing and entry into force of the headquarters agreement between the GCF and the Republic of Korea. And so that will be the specific act, if one were to go down the standalone route, that would imbue the fund with that ability to act on the international plane and engage with other actors under international law. That's not, and so therefore what's in the text serves as your guiding purpose and where you want to be. That will then be operationalized through acts taken by individual parties in the years to come. You may recall at TC3 we had some discussions around, and you kindly invited me to present some information around how one might provide privileges and immunities in a way that would be more efficient than it is in the GCF. There are options that could be included in the text here to enable that to potentially work, and that would obviously be for parties to consider. Maybe if I can cover a couple of other points. The difference between, I think I heard it a couple of times, legal personality, legal capacity. I think when we talk about this at the international level and at an entity level, for practical purposes, I think we should take the view that they are linked, they are distinct, linked, but ultimately get you to the same place, which is that the entity has the ability to act in its own name and on its own behalf. And so your personality is the standing under international law, and your capacity is the acts that you can undertake. But the two of them are interrelated. Typically, legal personality is a precursor to capacity, but ultimately they get you to the place where the entity itself can operate in its own name. Obviously, in the context of a hosted institution, a fund hosted by an existing institution, the acts of the fund would be in the name of the host, and therefore you benefit from their legal status and their privileges and immunities, and therefore there's no need for independent, separate personality or capacity for the fund itself, because it's not, it doesn't exist as a consequence of it being hosted in an existing institution in the way that has been discussed. I think I'll probably stop there. I hope that provided some clarity, but perhaps not, and happy to take the conversation offline.
Thank you, Raj. Does anyone have a specific follow-up question, or is this something indeed that can be taken offline? Mo, you have a follow-up.
Thank you so much, Raj. Then your last point that you mentioned, that if it is hosted, it does not need this, and then it does not exist as an separate international entity. This is my understanding of what you said. So if it does not have the international legal personality, then it is not acknowledged as a separate entity. And if it is functioning under any existing institution, which it gets its legal personality from, that means that it does not exist as a separate entity. It exists as a component or a subsidiary of this institution, which is giving it its personality. So it's not on the same level, it is subsidiary. Thank you.
I think the answer is a bit more nuanced than that. The fund is a fund. It just operates in its own name. It's its own entity. It just doesn't have its own legal personality. It operates through the personality of the host institution. Yes, it won't have its own international legal personality, and so it won't itself operate under international law in its own name. But I think that's not necessary. That doesn't mean that the fund is not its own entity, because it will have its own board, it will have its own sets of rules, it will take its own decisions. But it's that it will operationalize those decisions through the personality and capacity and legal status of the host institution.
Laurence, please.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. Thanks a lot, Raj, for the explanation. I just wanted to make sure that I understand, I think, what you said at the very beginning, which is basically that the COP itself can indicate an intent, but whatever is the language that we capture, it doesn't fix the issue, right? It doesn't create, it doesn't, I don't know, conjure legal personality just because we put it in a sentence. So it's about indicating an intent, but the wording doesn't actually creates the personality or the capacity or, okay.
That's correct.
Avinash, please.
Do I understand then, Raj, that if the fund does not have its own legal personality, it wouldn't be able to act on its own in the capital markets or internationally? Is that what you're saying?
Again, yes.
Mo, please.
Okay, so if there is no host country agreement, so what happens with the issue of the World Bank and as one of the options? So how do we deal with that? How can we make sure that the independence that we are trying to create for this fund, from our point of view, this is a standalone fund, it is independent. So how does this link to the discussion that we are having under the World Bank discussion? Because what you have mentioned is very clearly, for me, is that we are not creating a new fund. We are just like allocating a new fund. So if we don't have a host country agreement, can this fund be hosted by the World Bank? Or if we have a host country agreement, will this fund be able to be hosted at the World Bank? Because what we heard yesterday was, if this fund has legal personality, then it will not be hosted in the World Bank. This was clearly said yesterday by the World Bank. So, so now if we are saying option 2, then we are de facto accepting the option of the World Bank as a host, because we are saying it will have in the future, and then following your narrative, this will be conferred by the host institution. So we are de facto accepting that it is a World Bank option. While if we say option 1, so we are confirming that it has its own international personality, legal personality. It needs to be operationalized by an agreement or an understanding, as you mentioned, like the GCF, and then it moves forward. Then it does not become, as per the World Bank have mentioned yesterday, it will not become possible for the World Bank to host it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mo. I'm not sure I fully understand the premise of the question. Perhaps we can let's pick that up separately, and I'll try and give you some clarity if I can.
Because one of the options that was put forward was the interim arrangement. So we have a transitional process whereby it goes to the World Bank and then it moves out. But with this, and what we heard from you, if it goes to the World Bank, it will not go out, because then it gets its own international personality from the World Bank. And then you will not have another acknowledgement by another party that it is, and then it will not, it will go there and stay.
Okay, so I understand that question. It won't get the World Bank's personality. Like it's not that the bank will give, here you go, you're a fund, you have my personality. It will be that the fund, when it takes its decisions and needs to operationalize the funding, it will utilize the World Bank's legal personality. So were the fund to be placed within the bank for an interim period, as you mentioned, there's nothing stopping the parties from 3 years' time deciding it should actually be a standalone entity, taking a decision and making the necessary arrangements, which may involve having to change provisions of the governing instrument to accommodate that, and moving the fund into its own entity. It would then lose the protection that would be provided as a financial intermediary fund hosted by the bank, and so you would then have to start utilizing some of the tools that the GCF has started to try and use to obtain its own universal understanding of its personality and its privileges and immunities.
Thank you. So, and following what Laurence have mentioned, then having the language that the fund shall have its legal personality does not also make it not possible to be stationed or intermediary at the World Bank.
I think we would need to look at the language to see. I understand your point. I think ultimately what the governing instrument could say is that when the fund operates, it will operate with or through legal personality and capacity. That would leave it ambiguous as to whose legal personality or capacity it's operating through, and would provide that flexibility to either house it in an existing institution or a standalone without having to change those privileges. So I think there's wording that we could work around if the intent is to ensure that it can operate through legal personality. Well, that's obviously going to be the case because it will have to in order to transfer funds to any third party. I think that that parties can work on, or members can work on the language for that.
Okay, thank you very much for all those answers. And again, I mean, Raj is here all week, so feel free to approach him with any other additional questions that you might have. Jaime, did you want to take the floor again? Okay. Okay, so I think we're now done with this sort of as far as we can get on the legal status, and perhaps I could then ask Richard to take on the next set of issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, good morning, colleagues. Thank you, Uti. Thursday morning, bright and early, almost afternoon. There is coffee outside. If you need it, we will do a break just now, but in case you need a cup of coffee or some sweets or something, whatever's there, it is outside. So we're going to now move on to the next issue, which is around the designation of the fund as an operating entity of the financial mechanism, and we essentially have two paragraphs. One is that there is no designation, and the other one is that it is designated as an operating entity of the financial mechanism of the Convention and the Paris Agreement. And then it talks then about, in this paragraph, about fulfilling the need for arrangements in accordance with Article 11. Again, just as we reflected on the last discussion, there's things that you capture in a governing document that are principles, and then there are actions that subsequently would implement that. So we're just talking here about the principle of the designation. Assuming we agree on this, then there would be a subsequent action mandating generally the Standing Committee on Finance to prepare those arrangements with the board, but that's a separate issue. So just to be clear that some things in this document are the principle capturing, and then other places deal with the action. So let me open the floor for comments on this one. I hope there's some flexibility being shown from developed countries on this. We know this is a very important position for developing countries. So let me open the floor for comments, please. Okay, colleagues, I see no comments. Can we take it that this is agreed? Okay, there's no. So proposal 1 is agreed. Thank you very much. Can we move on? Seeing no objection, there we go, gavel. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next issue, which is the, Christina, I asked for comments, nobody comments, then the assumption is that you've agreed upon it. You agreed to the proposal. I asked for comments, and nobody agreed. Nobody said anything, so fundamentally there
are two proposals on the
would you like to comment
then
on which proposal?
Proposals 2. Yeah. So I don't understand your proposition, Richard.
My proposition that there was no comments, and that we assume that proposal 1 was therefore accepted because it's important to developing countries, and we've asked for flexibility. If you're unwilling to be flexible, then that's okay as well. But if you wish to comment, I'll let you comment. But if you don't want to comment, we must assume that there's inflexibility in this process, which is very dangerous. David, you want to comment?
Yeah, I'm happy to, Richard, and thank you for the invitation. And we have talked around this issue on a number of occasions over our previous meetings. I support the notion that we want guidance to be provided to the fund. I am yet to see an argument that is compelling to me with respect to why the designation is important, because the two arguments that have been put to me relate to guidance, which we've already accepted, and the other relates to review. And I don't see, I think there is a fundamental requirement for there to be review of a future fund. I think that needs to be rigorous, and I think it needs to be timely, and I think it needs to be meaningful. I don't think that the only way we get to that is through it being captured in the review of the periodic review of the financial mechanism, which I don't think does justice to the review of the operating entities of the financial mechanism as they stand. So I don't find either of those arguments compelling, particularly because the first one I think is compelling, and it's already an agreement that this committee has reached. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Let us not confuse things. We did not agree anything so far. So we've understood that that is not something that's contested. What is contested as it stands here is the designation. I'm assuming that developed countries aren't willing to move on this one. Christina, are you able to show some flexibility on the designation?
That's a great question, Richard, and when we get to other sections like funding arrangements, I hope you ask the same question of others. For us, we support the proposal to no text for the following reasons. We support the paragraph that is currently in the clean text document. I think that's number 4, same reasons that David raised. The reasons I heard at TC3 for the importance of this designation had to do with that guidance and authority in reporting. It had to do with eligibility, and it had to do with symbolism. We never came back to these discussions. We're not being put in this binary yes-no situation, which I find not necessarily conducive to actual negotiations of trying to find compromise. When we get to the eligibility section, let's talk about why that's important, and we can talk about the eligibility. And on the symbolism, I continue to believe that the establishment of this fund, and hopefully we'll get to text and the operationalization of this fund in Dubai will give that symbolism. So I'm not convinced that we need that designation of an operating entity. So yes, supporting proposal 2, but I don't like it framed in the context of not showing flexibility. Thank you.
I think Diane was very clear this morning that there is no flexibility in this process. She was very clear that we're being forced to do something. That is the view of developing countries. But anyway, thank you very much. So I'm not going to take any more comments on this one. It's clear that there's a preference from developing countries for the designation as being a really important part of fulfilling what is in the convention, what is agreed, what functions we've given to both bodies. And there's also clearly no willingness to show flexibility on this one. So thank you very much. I'm now going to move. Do you want to take it? Okay, Uti's going to do the next one.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, then moving to the next set of issue, which is the composition of the board. You will recall that we had a good discussion on the composition of the board on Monday. My understanding, my sort of reading of that discussion, our reading of that discussion, because it is 2 co-chairs here together, was that there was indeed a considerable degree of convergence, and rather than sort of again entertaining a long discussion, we know your proposals. We read the position to be close to basically a couple of things. What we to report back from the Monday's discussion. First of all, that it's important for everyone that that there's an equitable and balanced representation of all parties in the board. There was openness to consider the GCF board model with 24 plus some tweaks, if you like. So with including a representative from the indigenous people and 1 non-party seat, non-voting seat. So we'd be talking about 24 plus 2. Also that there was a lot of convergence in terms of ensuring that there has to be active involvement of stakeholders, including a clear mechanism for that, and also to make sure that that gender balance is respected in the composition of the board. From the co-chair side, also stressing that it's important that the board is elected and curate either already at COP28 or early 2024, and indeed needs to start its work in early 2024. And we believe that this discussion on the composition of the board and also the functions of the board, that's irrespective of what is the location of the board. So the floor is open, and again, we're kind of trying to understand your flexibilities on this to see if we can move further than where we were on Monday on this. Diane, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to start by saying that to the co-chairs, so thank you for this opportunity to discuss. And what I said this morning goes both ways, right? So we don't want, as developing countries, to just accept no negotiation and vice versa. So I think we want to see a conversation going both ways. Now, on the issue of the board, which is really important composition, which is really important to AOSIS, there are some sensitivity issues here, and I just apologize in advance to anybody that's offended, but representation is really important for us in AOSIS, and there are huge political risks for several of our region based on the way that we nominate board members, that the seats could be empty for a long time. And these are political issues, and in many cases, smaller and developing states and so on get caught up in these issues, and then we're not represented. This is a really personal issue for many of us in AOSIS. And what happened at the GCF board and in many others with respect to GULAC was difficult for us. We fight hard to get our voices heard, to have a seat around the table, and then to have it being taken away for political issues. The risk of a political issue impacting the ability for smaller and developing states to participate on the board is high. And so AOSIS members are asking for 2 seats that we can make sure that if our other regional groupings are having difficult conversations and difficult issues, they can go forward and have those conversations without smaller and developing states being impacted and their voices being heard. I mean, I don't like to pull the gender card, and I'm not doing that, but in many of our regions, we made sure women have a voice, and 50% of our 63 million are women, and we want to make sure that we keep having them have access to a voice. So this is really important to us. So once again, it's no apology for any it's not a meaning to offend. So we really would like to, in the spirit of what I said this morning, it's a conversation we're having. Christina, I like the idea in that negotiation, but we're planning to working together. And we're trying to design a fund that is, that really helps kick ass and really helps all of the smallest of us participate as much as possible. So we're asking for 2 seats for smaller and developing states with 2 alternatives. So that would be really important to us. In the case of this particular fund, we would not have asked it for the GCF and so on, but in the case of this particular fund, we think that the quality of the fund and the uniqueness of the fund and the ability of the fund to attract external resources, which is what we want to see in paragraph 5C of the COP decision that gave us our mandate, that it would be a good idea to have observers on the board that's sitting in the room, even when you have closed sessions. I really and truly believe that the quality of our decisions will be much better. I believe that the GCF board had that from the beginning. I believe the quality and the pace at which the GCF developed would have improved as well. So I'm putting that out there for all of us to consider for small and developing states, if that could be what we could have accomplished at the end of the day. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Now I'm not sure whether it was Ali or Mo first. Ali, please.
Yeah, thank you, Co-Chair. Building on what Diane you said, my proposal in the last day, I said that for the first meeting only, I'm not challenging the quorum and our unity of our group, only for the first meeting, since a lot of issues will be discussed by the board in the first year. Our request is that without the representation or nomination by all regional groups, the meeting should not start. It should not happen that Asia Pacific is not there, SIDS are not there, or LDCs are not there, or ILAC is not there, and some countries are starting like discussing everything. So only for the first meeting, and after that, the quorum and everything can be like taken. This is again my plea to all of you to accept this because of the genuine unique circumstances of Asia Pacific and many others as well. And secondly, I want to know your reflections on the proposal that there should be the balance between developed and developing. Is you sense a convergence on that or not? That's
just to confirm that sort of our sense was that there was indeed a convergence on the balance developing. At least that's what the co-chairs understood from that discussion. Next I have Mo, followed by I think it's Mateus, Debbie, and Jaime. Mo, please.
Thank you so much. And very quickly, our original preference was the structure that we have here in this, which is more developing countries and which are the ones who are really impacted. We can consider, out of flexibility, the approach of the GCF, which is the 50-50 approach with the same structure where the GCF is. Second element, yes, I think the idea of having observers, non-voting observers in the room, we also are open for that, like what we have in the GCF. We can expand, but we need also to discuss who are we expanding and the number. So this is another element. I agree with Ali and Diane that we need also to put a safeguard for the representation has to be in the board to start working. It has to be also in the board to function. And with the GCF proposal, you already have, like for SIDS, for example, you have 2 seats, one principal and one alternate, but they can if one is not able to attend, the other one would represent them. It's not by the number of people sitting in the room. It is rather by the ability of people to take decisions and the right policies that are put forward in terms of making decisions and making things happen. Again, I would like to highlight that the issue of refugees is very important. It's not only indigenous people. You have now millions of climate-induced refugees, and those are ones that we need to find a way to include them in this board. Otherwise, we are having a blind eye on a very clear impact, in particular in Africa. And many of the regions, not only Africa, but Africa is very clear there. So if we are going in the direction of expanding participation of some or highlighting participation of some, then we have to take them as very important observers. I think there was a G77 position on the composition. We work on that, but again, as we said this morning, if we want to move forward and deliver, let's keep to what the success stories and make sure that we have the right operational modalities to take into consideration the concerns of who have said. Thank you.
Thank you, Mo. Mateus, followed by Debbie.
Thank you very much, Uti. First of all, just as Ambassador Mo has said, our preference is to build from successful models, including the GCF, which provided us with a very interesting dynamic on the board composition specifically, for decision making and so on. But again, we're happy to engage constructively on ways to further improve that model. And we're willing to really have a dialogue on that, as Diane has just mentioned. I would also say that we are the same view of Ali on the quorum for the first meeting. Due to all of the recent experiences when it comes to this grouping perspective. Hopefully none of the groupings, developing ones, is going to be caught up in a situation that we do not have any representatives in the board. But as the first meeting of the board is one that is of high importance to the very dynamics of how it's going to be structured and run its policies and so on. We do believe that these proposals coming from our colleagues could be evaluated and perhaps put into practice. Finally, I actually took the floor to make something very clear. Our understanding of this process is the one that developing countries have been pushing for loss and damage finance for more than 30 years, championed by our colleagues from AOSIS. And this got us to a situation in Sharm el-Sheikh that, of course, with the goodwill and good faith of our partners, we were able to reach an agreement at both COP and CMA on these arrangements for the fund and new funding arrangements. But we usually, not always, but we usually tend to forget the huge amount of efforts and contributions that came from civil society supporting this process. And I just took the floor here to finalize my statement to make it very clear and crystal clear that ABU, Brazil, and our constituency fully supports enhancing and improving civil society participation in the process of the fund that is going to be established. What I mentioned in my previous interventions on the matter was that we do need to have civil society acting in the room of the board meetings, but also intersessionally. I think it's really important because the experiences that we have in vertical funds for climate change is that they participate with some constraints in the board meetings, and intersessionally, most of the members of the board do not have extensive and improved engagement with civil society, if not reached out by them. So we do need to create more space for participation, enhanced participation. We do see value added in having participation of more vulnerable groups. Our preference and strong call is for indigenous people. There is a very important contribution that indigenous people, particularly coming from developing countries, can do for this new loss and damage fund, and we are very adamant and vocal about that. And to finalize, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, GRULIC members, I understand we are also very vocal and supportive of the participation of women and girls in this new board, and we do believe in gender balance and the quality of results that this board can deliver when it comes to that specifically. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthias. Next I have Debbie, followed by Angela.
Thank you, Uti. I just wanted to come in to support the importance of the issues that Deanne outlined earlier in the conversation. So the UK supports the need for 2 seats for SIDS and to have 2 alternates. And as the UK, we would also like to see 2 seats for LDCs, and this would apply to whichever proposal we adopt. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Next I have Angela, followed by Jaime.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I just want to support the comments made by other colleagues, Ambassador Mo, and of course Matthias as part of the GRULIC seat. Just let me highlight that it's important to build in terms of the successful experiences that we had in other forums and the precedents that we have, and we think that the model that we and the experience that we have in terms of the GCF could be a good one and should be considered as part of the composition of the board. As a developing country, let me highlight and reiterate what is our position. We want a board for the Loss and Damage Fund that has equitable representation of developing countries, which means equal numbers of developed and developing countries. And we think, as was mentioned by Ali as well as by Mateus, we think that the board will not meet until all groups have nominated the members. It's important to ensure that all parties will be well represented at the first meeting of the board, which is a decision, and key meeting in terms of discussion of how the board is going to work, the rules, the discussion in terms of modalities and everything. So we can work on a proposal for a paragraph on the safeguard for the first meeting of the board. And in terms of the participation of observers, and we fully support the comments made by the others, I think it's important to allow the participation of observers, not non-voting observers, but we want to ensure that, of course, other actors like vulnerable groups, as was mentioned by Mateo, civil society, indigenous people and local communities, gender balance, youth, should be considered as part of the board. And let me highlight that it's important somehow to see a balanced representation, because we do not want to have just indigenous people and local communities from one side of the world and the other side of the world will be left behind. So we think to see some balance in terms of the nomination of observers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Angela, next I have Jaime, followed by Adao.
Well, thank you very much. We find this representation obviously a crucial important point. Ideally, we wanted to see a board of contributors versus recipients to also pull it out of the entrenchment that we found also in the GCF and other places. Second best was to focus on geographic representation. I think that's also a very workable way forward, and we still would like people to consider it. But in the spirit of also flexibility, and that's what the co-chairs have asked us to be, we're also very open to follow the co-chairs' proposal for this session here. But that's for us a big step forward, just to say here in the spirit of flexibility. Then we want to signal also that that inclusivity is very important. The role of civil society, we've seen with the GCF, they're there, but they only speak at the end of the round, and we can't have an opportunity to really discuss what they bring forward. And I would like to get them into the process way earlier, or actually already in the we have a discussion with them prior to the board to take their concerns into account, and because I think that would be more effective. The idea of migrants, Mo said it, climate refugees is not a legal term. I used to work for UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency. We would love that to be a legal term. It's not been agreed. It's climate-induced migration. But yes, I think we have to have specific attention to that challenge, because it's going to be projected a big challenge to us going forward. And we need language also on gender. There's no language on it, and I would add some sentence saying, taking into account the gender balance of the board, and as aspiration going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jaime. I have Adao, followed by Christina.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. I think for us, the composition of the board is quite critical for us. I think that's very important for us, since this will be helping the fund to start work immediately. I think that's very good elements that we need to consider right now. The proposed language or text on Proposal 1, I think that's quite useful for us, since it reflects some of our position. And we believe that the membership would be not too big, but at least I think for us 24 is quite appropriate and it's ideal for us. And we are, of course, remain flexible, but this is some size that we propose, 24 membership. And we also would like to see that we could learn from these TC memberships that right now we have 2 members from the LDCs and 2 from seats. So we can also bring this issue into the board if we establish the board. So 2 members from seats and 2 from LDCs. So geographical equal representation for this membership is also very critically important. That is what's also mentioned by Angela before me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then Christina, followed by Diane.
Thank you, Uti. We had, coming into this meeting, supported the idea of meeting once there was quorate on the board, but understand the concerns that have been raised, and would support just the first meeting commencing once all the seats have been nominated. I hope that happens quickly. I would also want to support what was first put on the table by Diane earlier about 2 seats for SIDS plus an alternate for each of those 2 seats. So it would be 2 seats plus 2 alternates for SIDS. And the same would be for the LDCs, 2 seats plus 2 alternates. I guess I would implore some flexibility from colleagues to consider the proposal that we put on the table at TC3 to have non-party, both representatives from Indigenous peoples, civil society, to be part of the board itself. I think I hear the importance of active observation and engagement at board meetings as well as intersessionally. And asking for some flexibility to be made to actually make the jump. If we're asking for active participation, I guess I'm not entirely sure what the difference then is from just making them one of the board members. To Mo's point about refugees, Jaime made I think a good point. I didn't hear the part about sort of the classification. That said, if there's a desire to find a way for that constituency to also be a board member, we're willing to figure out a way to do that. The way that we had in our proposal, there was an ability to self-select through various constituencies and groups. For example, there is a group for Indigenous peoples as well as for CSOs. So if there's a way we can figure this out, I'm happy to work with folks to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. Next I have Diane, please.
Thank you. In my initial intervention, I forgot to mention that about 80-90% of our members are from the Asia Pacific region and the Latin American Caribbean region, and those are the 2 constituencies that really struggle to nominate persons. Not only do they struggle, but the time you spend in this seat is just rotating so quickly. It's really difficult for anybody to stay long enough to make an impact to our decision making. So I just want to make sure that we also represent the Pacific states here. So I just wanted to highlight that. The other question that is more like a question, co-chairs, that I know that we're talking about the participation on the board in terms of. I agree with Christina, hopefully, wholly that we could just put them on the board and let's see what happens. It's something new. If we're going to take a leap, let's take a leap. We're all great negotiators. We can more than handle a few little observers, right? So there's nothing to be afraid of, really. I think that would be very exciting to see. But what I wanted to know is, what about the arrangements? Like, are we going to talk about the participation of NGOs and so on in the arrangements section as well? I'm not sure what is the process going forward with that, but I do agree with Mo about refugees that are being created due to climatic activities. In the Caribbean, 25% of Dominica's population came to Antigua after their hurricane, and although we are always happy to welcome more people to our country, it would be better to be better prepared to welcome them rather than them just showing up on our doorsteps. So, which could make a difference in how we move forward. So I just want to flag that, and I just want to know what is the, where do they fit into the all of this fits into the arrangements. Thanks.
Thanks, Diane, and thanks. That was a really quite good question. And given how slowly we are now sort of progressing, I would expect, and haven't discussed this with Richard, but we would probably want to give guidance to the board to develop modalities for active participation of stakeholders. I mean, I think it would be something, that type of language that we would perhaps include in the governing instrument. Next, I have Heike, followed by Albara. Heike, please.
Thank you very much, Uti, and thank you all, also colleagues for the good discussion on this important aspect, and in the spirit of making progress and find common language. Much of what we heard today, again, I think we can fully support. We can relate to different aspects. We heard definitely colleagues from SIDS and LDCs calling for strong representation. I heard mentioning of 2 seats for each grouping. I mean, not knowing the overall number, but I can relate to this call, and definitely in whatever then the setup is calling for strong representation of SIDS and LDCs. I think also an inclusive, a meaningful participation of non-state actors. I have related to it before. I don't want to go into this detail, but rights-based and not only limited to our exchanges on the board, but really also enshrined participation, accountability in what the fund is then doing is important to us. Self-representation, of course, is something that we definitely support, and I hope with what I heard from colleagues that we find a joint meaningful way to make this happen. One additional thing I would like to mention, and Diane made this point very strongly, and I still remember it dearly. So we always, also in our submission, asked for parties to ensure gender parity and inclusiveness in their nominations for an even better work of the future board. Thank you.
Thank you, Heike. Next, I have Alvara, followed by Sumaya.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I definitely agree to many colleagues who've highlighted the successful model that we have today. I believe that the elements that we're trying to address here, including the equal representation, the representation from regional groups, the modality of engagement of the CSOs, complying with Article 11, and also many of the other elements that were addressed by colleagues can be definitely addressed through the model that we have now under the Green Climate Fund. So I believe that this would be definitely a model that's functional and successful, and that was clearly highlighted by many of the previous speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Sumaya, followed by Mo.
Thank you so much. I also, without repeating, I support the option of equitable representation of between the developed and developing, and the discussion going on the active representation of civil society. I guess that's a very good thing that I would support. However, I guess many civil societies in developing countries are not fully engaged because of financial barriers and that. Maybe this is a separate discussion. However, I hope there will be ways and means to support representatives from different regions to see them engage and to see balance between South and North civil society presence in such important meetings. I also underline with concern the modality and the process of representation of civil society in the board. Because I would love to see them represented, and I agree on the issue raised by Mo on the importance of seeing a representation from displaced, also from the displacement community. I understand the issue raised by Khemi around that it's incorrect to say refugees because it will be mixed with other also agenda that has nothing to do with the displacement in the context of climate change. And even with that, we need to give consideration to issues related to cross-border and internally displaced and migration, because for Africa, these are key issues. Having that said, I think I would also want to cautious the exercise we are doing here, because this is not line by line, this is option by option. This is not coming closer to each other. So we should really find a way of collapsing options and working in a mood that would take us in a real progress, because we are saying there are issues that we are working on, coming closer, agreeing on, having consistency on, but we are not really moving fast. We could be here until the end of the day without agreeing on anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumaya. And on this specific point, I mean, while it may seem that there are still sort of multiple options on the board composition, including on the specifics, just to rest assured that we as co-chairs, we do have a good sense of what we could present. But again, we understood that TC members really wanted to have this opportunity to again sort of express their views. So we are providing this opportunity, but at the same time, you know, I think. I know Richard is probably getting a cup of coffee, so let me just take advantage of his absence. Basically saying that in any time that you give us a chance, I think we are quite ready to come forward with our views on or proposals on loads of the open issues. But again, I mean, our understanding was that really for the working modality for specifically for this morning was that colleagues want to engage in real negotiations and expressing the views, so we are allowing for that. Now, Mo, followed by JC.
Thank you so much. Just to clarify one thing, that our understanding on your proposal was exactly following the GCF model, and we can look at the civil society participation. If we are going into a direction of increasing representation from groups, then we are working on the basis of this kind of balance, which is 14-10, and then we can work based on that. But within the model of the GCF, it is the model of the GCF. Also to highlight that there is realities for those of you who are not attending the GCF board within those within the geographic groups.
Our seat will developing repartition and go more for recipient contributors, but in order to demonstrate flexibility, we'll be happy to move towards the GCF style representation. And then, even though I'm quite delighted to hear that the GCF model is such a wonderful model, this is definitely not what I heard when I took over the co-chairmanship of this financial body 2.5 years ago. But then I certainly did a great job in co-chairing. I'm not so sure. So this is what I would like to add. If we can fix some of the shortcomings of the GCF board functioning now, between ourselves, that would be great. Even letting the board itself to have conversation on how to best organize its deliberations. So I think a few areas where we could do better. The first is the representation of non-state actors, including, as Mo said, the climate migrants. That would be very important to me. What I did observe in the GCF as far as non-state actors' participation is a very bad way of hearing them after having taken the decision. I think it's a pity that the interventions of the non-state actors are not taken into consideration before the board members are taking their decision, and also to be able for the members to explain to the non-state actors why they are not following their advice. So that was something that I was not very happy and not very comfortable with at the GCF board. So maybe we can have some provision on that as well. I do think that we have to add some provision on the gender balance with the respect of geographical representation. I think it's good to demonstrate a real will at the start of this new fund to have some really real gender balance. So that means that maybe we could reflect on the possibility to mandate the board to have a clear answer to some of the questions that all of us we have been talking here inside the GCF board style board in order to make sure that these issues are not thrown away as soon as the board is created. Lastly, to answer Ali's point, I mean, I understand the difficulties that some geographical grouping may have to designate representatives, and I mean, it's a reality. I think there is another reality, which is the need for this board to start very quickly. So I would be in favor of taking your point, but with limitation, some kind of cut-off date in order not to delay or postpone too much the start of this fund.
Thank you, JC. Laurence, followed by Georg.
Thank you. It's lovely to be following the intervention by JC and building on his experience. I think from Canada's seat, we completely subscribe to a number of things that have been said before. I just wanted to come back on a couple of points. So the first one is the idea that was expressed, I think, by Diane first and supported by many others around ensuring 2 seats plus alternates for LDCs and for seats. This is also something that we would be very happy to support. The idea of ensuring that non-state actors are considered members and not active observers, I think, is very important for us, and so that's also something where we would echo the pleas made by Christina a bit earlier, that we can move on and be innovative. Fully support, I think it was Aheke who spoke about gender parity. This for us, the term parity is even more meaningful than balance, and I think this is something that we would strongly encourage. And then finally on the point of looking at representation from refugees, this is also something we're happy to explore. Finally, maybe a message around the fact that representation in the board is, for us, a key way to ensure that the perspectives of the right people are being taken into account in decision making, but that doesn't alleviate or diminish the responsibility of the fund in its operations to make sure that all of those perspectives are also taken into account across all of its operations and its modalities.
Thank you, Laurence. Then turning to Georg, and after that to June. Georg, please.
Thank you, Oti. So on this issue, yes, a board that is equitable and geographically balanced. And when you talk about balance, I think we have to also, we do have to reflect in some way the need for gender balance on the board. I think we can certainly support the idea of that has been mentioned around 2 plus 2 alternates for seats and LSCs in the board in particular. We also have as I mentioned earlier, we think there should be representation on the board from indigenous people and civil society, and we're particularly concerned about particularly vulnerable groups, including youth and women. Happy to explore the suggestion to look at representatives from refugees. But I would also like to repeat what I said on Tuesday, that we have to, and this is in line with what JC also was saying now, we have to find a way of expressing not expressing, but setting down very clearly what we expect from the board as far as setting up modalities for meaningful participation by all stakeholders beyond those who are represented on the board. And I agree with JC. I mean, I think we have to be very clear in the mandate that we give to the board here, so it's not somehow forgotten or put at the back burner once the board starts working. Lastly, on this issue of the first meeting of the board, I think we are also from our seat okay with somewhere, not here, but somewhere else, just express the notion that the meeting will meet at the first time once all seats are nominated, and then we can just cross our fingers and hope that that will happen very quickly once we have done the job. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. It's a very rich discussion going on here, and I think we, from my seat, we very much would like to see meeting of minds on this issue. I guess where we were coming from was that we definitely understand the importance of the small island developing states and the least developed countries, and I hear the very strong interest of having multiple members from those states, and another thing I think that was on our mind was trying to make sure that this board is able to be functioning up and running as quickly as possible. And so from those perspectives, we were initially thinking of this supporting and maybe making some modification to what is said here as Proposal 2. For example, like in one of the elements in Proposal 2 talks about, of course, in this subparagraph H, how to kind of calculate the contribution and from 2026 based on cumulative contributions. But we thought maybe in order to be dynamic in the composition of the board, perhaps that can be modified to something like starting from 2026 based on contribution disbursed during the previous 2 years, something like that. But Also, having heard many of the voices around this table today and previously, and also from what is coming from the chair right now, I think it's also a very wise proposal coming from the chair, especially talking about the equitable balance in the membership. And so I think we are open to that kind of thinking as well. Also, and I think I would just add that the importance of the gender balance, I think that is quite important for us. And so I think I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. June, last word to David, and I'll provide a way forward, hopefully. David, please.
Thanks, Uti. I'll try and be brief. I guess my starting position is, and this is acknowledging that I've been away from the GCF board for a while, and with all due respect to your colleague to your right, and JC, who's currently missing from my right, my starting assumption is we could do better than the GCF board. Not that it has gross deficiencies, but we could do better. I want to thank Diane for her opening intervention in this session, and I wanted to signal that we very much support her proposition that SIDS should have 2 seats and 2 alternates, and similarly Adau's intervention with respect to LDCs, also something that we would support. I think we should be brave enough to take up Christina's challenge that non-state actors have a role to play that is limited by the way in which we currently allow them to engage in our processes, and we should cross that Rubicon. On Ali's appeal that we allow ourselves to sort of pause until such time as nominations have been made, I think that is of course reasonable. I think what JC is proposing with respect to trying to give that some kind of time-bound element to it probably does make sense, just to create the necessary pressure. And I wanted to finish by just thanking Mo again for Egypt's hospitality. Last night was really fantastic, and it does help us come together in those social contexts. So again, thank you for your hospitality.
Thank you, David. And I think we're all sort of very grateful to Mo for the hospitality. It's really something extraordinary. Okay, so we've now, I believe, we've done a full round on the board composition, and just to rest assured what I was telling in response to Sumaya's question, that indeed I believe Richard and we are ready to table a proposal on the board composition as part of the other open issues that we'll be looking at, and indeed, while we are looking for a meeting of minds rather than banging heads together, but don't rest assured that we can also do the latter should it come to that. No? Okay. So I'd propose that, because I see some of these issues are clearly linked. So on the composition of board, I believe is also very much linked to the election, the language used for the election of co-chairs. So I would propose that we skip that, and we would sort of, once we have a proposal on the composition of the board, I believe we'll be able to propose a sort of acceptable language on used for the election of co-chairs, and then we could actually then move on to eligibility. Alvaro, please.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. I believe we did quite good progress, and as you mentioned, we're getting closer, at least on the previous issue. So I believe it will be useful for us also to look at the election of the co-chairs and share our views on it in order to help you come back with something that captures both elements. So it would be useful to maybe have a discussion on that. So if we can see it on the screen and move to that, I also have comment on that part. Thank you.
Thank you, Albara. And yes, indeed. I mean, we of course are in your hands and very happy to engage on line-by-line negotiations as requested by members. So perhaps I could ask the election of board co-chairs to be put on the screen, and those of you wishing to express your flexibility on that, the floor is open. Do you wish to start, Albara, please?
Thank you very much, Co-Chair, and I do have a comment on this. I believe that the first proposal is definitely a workable one, but I see a very important element missing in there, and maybe that would also help you and your Co-Chair to come back with languages that capture the views of all. So I believe it's important to reflect a language that says the board shall elect one co-chair from a developed country and one co-chair from a developing country. I see that's missing in the first proposal, and I think it's very important for us to be reflected there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other views on the election of board co-chairs?
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. Could we see that in writing on the screen, please? Thank you.
Okay, and then David, please.
Thanks, Uti. What I wanted to comment on is an element that's common to the two proposals, which is the term of the co-chairs. In my experience, I think there is good reason why we might want to contemplate a period longer than 1 year. I think, and I can tell by Richard's reaction that he's very supportive. So, no, in all seriousness, I think it constrains the way those two individuals come together, engage with the Secretariat, engage with their fellow members of the board in ways that are improved over time. So I would certainly be open to a longer period and would suggest that we contemplate that as we think about a landing here. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, David. Do you have a number of years in mind? How long a sentence?
Yeah, JC just said when the co-chairs are exhausted. No, but 2 or 3 as opposed to 1. That always remains Richard's, of course.
Okay, I think that may be something that we might put to a vote in the TC members shortly. That how long a sentence you want to give to the co-chairs. Okay, we have JC followed by Diane and then Heike, please, and then we'll hope to go to a next issue.
Yes, thank you, Uti. Very briefly, just to support David's points, I understand that Richard is not very much in favor. I don't know I can convince you, Richard, that at least a 2-year term would be better than a 1-year term. We lost a lot of time when I arrived. That's my experience. I mean, I'd be happy to discuss bilaterally why is it necessary to have more than 1 year. But this is really something that I did experience, and I really would like to convey this experience to all of you.
Okay. Diane, followed by Heike, and then we hope to move forward. And again, we're reflecting it on the screen because that's what was asked. So, Diane, please.
I think the term should be 2 years. I agree. As a former and current board member, with some space in between, I think the 2 year, the more continuity in the board is better. Especially if you're forming off a new fund at the beginning, that is really helpful. But the term should be at minimum 2 years. Thanks.
Heike, please.
Thank you, Uti. Thank you, co-chair. Also in the spirit of the different ideas and us having also, I think, the aspiration to be innovative and learn also from further experience, I support the 2 year or longer term proposal. And I would like also to reintroduce one sentence following the same lines, being innovative and think a bit new lines, what we had in our EU submission, where we were proposing one co-chair shall be from a contributing country of the fund and one co-chair from an eligible beneficiary country. So that would be an addition from my part.
Okay, let's not. I mean, thank you. We have heard views. I think you know, looking around the room, I think Richard and I, we have a clear idea of what is feasible, what's possible, what would not be objected outright that we were to propose it. So perhaps no need to discuss this further, and I would propose that we would move to the next issue. Eligibility. Richard.
Okay, thank you, Uti.
Lunch in half an hour.
Okay, we're going to have lunch in half an hour, so let's hopefully this is quick. We do not want to hear restated positions, so we have 3 proposals. Certainly, from what we've been hearing from colleagues, there seems to be general acceptance that Proposal 1 is the closest to the sham language and will probably not get us into too much trouble. Proposal 2 introduces the notion, which is standard practice, that parties or that developing countries need to be parties. So, for example, if we decided that we were not a party, we would therefore also not be eligible. And then the third one starts to go quite beyond the sham language. So could we work on the first one? Or could we put brackets around Proposal 2 and Proposal 3 and then look at the first one? And could I ask those colleagues that are proposing Proposal 2 and Proposal 3 if that was acceptable, or whether you would need to insist on your specific elements, and then noting that some issues may be dealt with elsewhere in terms of allocation and scope. So I open the floor for comments. Please, if you don't have a position and you need to restate your position, please consider the time. But so we're trying to find a way to bridge all 3 proposals that makes everybody happy and keeps us very, very close with the sham, or keeps us to the sham language. Thank you. Heike, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, co-chair. I must admit I'm not 100% sure what your proposal with the brackets on 2 and 3 means. And I can accompany this with explaining a bit that for us, you will know for us as the Irish-German seat, the prioritization of the particular vulnerable countries is a key priority. And therefore, in the submission of the EU members, the 3 EU members, we have on eligibility, on sub-funds, and on allocation language that has to, that from our perspective can lead to this objective. So it's a bit of a package, but that doesn't mean that we don't have openness to discuss the 3 elements. But at this point in time, not discussing all 3 elements, we have not the flexibility to take it off the table. So this is why I'm asking what the brackets mean in concrete terms. Thank you.
It means we're trying to clean text, Heike. We're trying to build bridges. We understand the issue of prioritization is different to the issue of eligibility. You know the complexity of this matter. What I'm giving to you is an undertaking from co-chair's side that the issue of prioritization can be dealt with elsewhere, and we will ensure that it's done elsewhere. If you're not satisfied with where it's done elsewhere, then we can come back to this, but it would be really nice to try and find an agreement to stick to the language in Sham, because then we'll can have another discussion about whether we're sticking to the Sham language, which I don't think is helpful. So I would put brackets around Proposal 2 and Proposal 3 on the understanding that we're not taking them off the table, but we're just parking them. And then I'm asking colleagues if it's acceptable to just go with what's in Proposal 1, and then on the understanding that the prioritization matter can be dealt with elsewhere. Because having language, namely LDCs and SIDS, is not an eligibility issue, right? The eligibility issue is developing country parties that are particularly vulnerable to climate change, and that's the language in Sham. And so this could be an easy thing that we agree upon, and we then move to the next discussion around how to capture the priorities that we all recognize relate to LDCs and SIDS, and then therefore we could have, again, nothing's agreed until everything's agreed, understanding, but we do have an option to just simply use the Sham language, and at the same time, I'm asking all colleagues that we break with practice, right, and not specifically refer to parties, because we understand you'd have to be a party to access a fund under this process, and therefore we would have, hopefully, at my understanding, a pretty clean, simple, straightforward paragraph on eligibility that's simple in the sense that it captures everything that we agreed upon in Sharm el-Sheikh. So that's my proposal. Do you want to come back, Heike?
You look at me questioningly, so I with the understanding that I also laid out that there are linked elements, eligibility, a structure with subfunds and allocation, and that we park it for the moment and can back to it and reopen it. For the moment, I'm fine.
Okay, colleagues, so the others that want to have your flags up, is that also acceptable to you, that we understand that some of these issues may be resolved somewhere else? I'm not committing on your behalf that you will resolve them, but can we go with that proposal for Proposal 1 on the understanding that the issue of prioritization of LDCs and SIDS would be taken up in appropriate places throughout the text, and that we have something workable in line with Sham?
If I may, co-chair, just the wording appropriate or not, I don't agree with that. I was talking about 3 relevant elements, and we could as seat agree with revisiting, but I wouldn't want to qualify the one as appropriate and the other as not appropriate.
I wasn't doing that, Heike. Sorry, I was just saying, I mean, there could be multiple places where you want to address this, not just in those 3. So where we see the need to address prioritization, or not, we just go back to the 3 proposals. can I get nodding heads? I will give you the floor if you want to, but I think I would like some feedback on our proposal. Is that okay? Okay. Not okay. You're insisting on wanting to have all 3 paragraphs there, rather than make progress on one. Okay, go ahead, please.
So thank you, Richard. No, this is such an important issue for us politically as well, and also for the whole, say, soul of our intentions of the loss and damage, that we do want to see it as a package, and yes, we will have flexibility looking at it together, and we can't kind of semi-categorize one of the elements out before we know that it actually lands for SIDS and LDCs, or for the most vulnerable in general terms, how we want to define it. Thank you.
Okay. No, I'm just going to continue with my list. Ali, Mohammed, Georg, and Jean-Christophe.
Thank you very much, Richard. Just to remind all of you that last year, the context of why we are here today discussing this fund, and in context of which catastrophe we had this historic decision in Sham, where we established this fund, and now we are discussing to operationalize it. In 2022, Pakistan witnessed one of the worst climate-induced catastrophe, where 1/3 of the country, and Pakistan is a really big country in terms of area, that was underwater. 33 million people, it's a really big number. They were displaced, they lost their homes. Almost 2,000 people died, and in total the economic losses were $40 billion. And what the proposal I see on screen is not acknowledging Pakistan as a vulnerable country as of now in this meeting. I really don't want a board to decide whether Pakistan is vulnerable or not. What else data you need that Pakistan is vulnerable? Look at this time, Libya. According to this proposal, Libya as of now is not eligible. Many people died, thousands. And I take it as a matter of solidarity with countries like Pakistan, that we are okay if you agree on the decision language which we adopted last year, and it was very categorically mentioned in all the discussions that anything or any decision which excludes Pakistan or not determine Pakistan as an eligible country right away is not acceptable to us. It's a clear red line from Pakistan. And we will not accept anything where it is said that yes, you are vulnerable, but a board will decide that whether you are vulnerable or not. So in terms of eligibility, the main in the governing document, we support that all particularly vulnerable developing countries, they are eligible to access the fund. We are okay to discuss the allocation because we are very sure that if whatever criteria you place, Pakistan will be ranked high because of its climate vulnerability and the losses it has suffered, and will get money. And I'm not doubting the intent of our colleagues from European Union that you want the money to flow to the most vulnerable. But most vulnerable are not limited to those two categories of groups. And that doesn't mean I don't acknowledge the vulnerability, extreme vulnerability of our SIDS and LDC's colleagues. And it is not, I'm not saying that you don't give them money and give that money to Pakistan. We are here to discuss that approaches that a catastrophe like Pakistan, it does not drain all the fund. We are okay to discuss the country caps, minimum floors. So it's we are open to discussion. But as of now, what I am hearing, and I'm not ready to accept that in the eligibility, we have to first contest that you are eligible, and because it's highly likely that Pakistan will not be there in the board, because I mentioned that it's Asia Pacific maybe will not be able to send any nomination, and if we are not there on the table and we are not able to convince the board that we are vulnerable, then what we are doing here. So it's ultimately it's a matter of solidarity for people of Pakistan. And again, since our colleagues from SIDS, they said that they are the people, almost 80 million. Pakistan alone is a country where 270 million people they live. So I'm representing those 270 million people, those who are vulnerable, and they should not be left behind. Especially, and that's why I'm pleading all of you that this eligibility thing we agreed in last year in the COP, don't try to renegotiate that thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Again, colleagues, a reminder of not trying to renegotiate something. But Ali, I just have a question for you. You raised the issue of all developing countries. Do you want that reflected, all, the addition of all?
No, whatever language is in the decision, that's acceptable to me. But not anything like on top of it.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll just check, and if we'll come back to you. Thank you. Mo, followed by Georg, followed by Jean-Christophe, followed by Alvaro. Mo.
Thank you so much. And I really didn't want to engage on that, but eligibility is one thing, and then as Ali have mentioned, allocation is a different story. And if colleagues here want to get a message out that you are categorizing developing countries people based on your vision, that not based on the impact of the disasters, I'm not going to be part of that. To be very clear, when colleagues say on eligibility, it is specific groups of countries, we think, because politically when I go back I have to tell my people that, then you are exactly saying what Ali is saying, that for you, you have different categories of human beings. I wouldn't say countries. You have some human beings are of a higher level and other human beings are lower. And this is the message when you talk about eligibility. Allocation is a different story. So if our colleagues want to link eligibility and allocation and everything to a specific thing, I will not be part of that. I will not support anything that says that human beings are different. But if you want to say it, please go out and say it in the media, that for you, you think that some human beings are not eligible because they are not living in specific groups of countries. We were very clear when we were in Sharm el-Sheikh that eligibility for all particular developing countries, particularly vulnerable. And I think this should not be part of a discussion that we're having here. I'm really, really offended by seeing that. So if you want to have a message coming out and civil society is sitting here, everybody is watching, that for you, politically, you have different categories of human beings, please do so, but I will not be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Colleagues, please, let us try and stick to the agreed language, and let's deal with other issues in appropriate places. I fear the risk of opening up the Sharm decision and the impact it has on our work. So thank you, Mohammed. I have Georg, followed by Jean-Christophe.
Thank you, Richard, co-chairs. I find this discussion, or the way we're approaching this now, rather confusing, because I feel that, honestly, and I don't think we disagree in this room, we're not making progress at all. I do take Heike's point that there is a totality in what we're putting together, and you need to see the totality. And when you, Richard, are asking about square bracketing or parking, and that is a textual negotiation approach. I had hoped that we could put our trust in you as co-chairs to provide something for us. And I don't think what we're doing now is a way forward, neither on this particular issue or in totality. So, but we can take this discussion at a certain point, but I will just, that was my preferred approach to what we're doing here. I think you as co-chairs have a very good sense of where committee members are as far as views, not only on this issue, but totality. And for me, that would have been a way forward where we could actually make progress and then start discussing the substance. But this is not a way to do it, in my view. And I would just urge us all to maybe rethink what we're doing here. We're halfway into first day, the second to last day of our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Georg. So I was trying to do a bit of both. So we also need to respect that there were colleagues that had requested us to work in this
No,
mode.
but what I'm saying is you can't do both. We need to find a way of doing this. You can't do both things because it's going to confuse what we're trying to, how we're commenting, what we're trying to help individually as committee members, you as coaches and ourselves. But we can't have both approaches at the same time. That just doesn't work, in my view. Thank you.
Okay, just hang on, colleagues, please. Okay, thank you, Georg. So let us just continue. Uti and I will reflect further on what you said over lunch. Again, I would seek indulgence from colleagues that have not spoken, whether or not you can accept our proposal, my proposal, on how to deal with this. If not, then that's fine. So on my list is Jean-Christophe, please.
Thank you, Richard. So I try to be brief. First, to answer Mo's point, the simple answer is no. No, I am not going to assess the quality of human being. That's just to be sure. And answer to Ali, my point is really to make sure that at the end of our process, Pakistan is sure to get what he needs to get through the fund. That's my intention there. Now, let's talk about your question, Richard, which is to me a question of process. This is pretty much what Eike explained. You know, I want to be sure that my intention that I expressed clearly there will be met at the end of our discussion. And I am afraid that there is a link between the discussion on eligibility, the discussion on allocation, and the discussion on how the fund will deliver its fundings. So the question is not yes or no, is how we can reach a consensus on that, playing with the three levels of discussion, the three elements of the discussions, which are the eligibility. And honestly, I'm not the first one to mention that. Avinash said it clearly last time in Santo Domingo that we should consider some kind of trigger to see how the fund could intervene in some countries. And that's your point, Ali. The disaster in Pakistan is so big that obviously we have to make sure that the fund will be working on that. So that has to be made clear, and to make sure in the recommendation that we are going to give to the COP. Then we have the allocation level, where we are going to, see how much we can dedicate, and that will depend crucially on the amount of money we are going to have actually. And then there is the way the fund is delivering it. So my question is really, my point is really a point of process, Richard. So, I mean, there is no need to get
really try to change or categorize among developing countries, eligibility, prioritization, or any attempt to invent categories for developing countries is something absolutely not acceptable. I believe my colleagues sitting next to me, Ambassador Mohammed and Ali, have clearly highlighted that eligibility is for all developing countries. And I really would want to just emphasize on the point that we're discussing eligibility, we're not discussing allocation. And then on eligibility, there is very clear decision about this. There are clear principles, there are clear, understanding, and I think that this is really not the venue for us to rediscuss this. Eligibility is for all developing countries. There is a very clear decision about this, and we should not really waste our time redefining or reinterpreting or trying to create a classification or invent a new classification for developing countries. That will definitely not help the process in any way, shape, or form. Thank you.
Thank you, Albara. Very wise words. I hope people are listening. Next on my list is Angela, Matthias, and then Hannah.
Thank you very much, Richard. And I just want to join the voice expressed by others that for us this is a key priority for all developing countries. We are today, no doubt, at a turning point where loss and damage is with justice, paving its pathway to becoming a third pillar of climate action and support, together with mitigation and adaptation. Addressing loss and damage has a well-deserved place at the very heart of the global response to the threat of climate action, both under the COP and as well as the Paris Agreement, in the context of sustainable development and efforts to eradicate poverty. This discussion is really key for us, for all developing countries. We can never accept an outcome that leaves us behind. ILAC countries represent 1.48% of the GHG emissions, and we are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change. In 2020, Latin American and Caribbean faced the sharpest economic contraction within the developing world, minus 7.7%, and minus 20% in GDP and investments growth, respectively. Without exception, all countries in the region have experienced a deterioration in their fiscal situation and an increase in general debt levels. We didn't create the problem of climate change. We are not big emitters. We do not generate the climate change. We want to see all developing countries on board. And one thing is eligibility, and the other thing is allocation. We do recognize that the Paris Agreement mentioned particularly the SIDS and the LDCs, but this is another discussion because loss and damage affects all populations around the world. Just let me be clear on this discussion. We will never accept an outcome that leaves developing countries behind. And my region is a key priority for us. And I'm representing not only Colombia, not only Honduras, I'm representing and I'm talking for all regions around the world. We want to see everybody on board. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela. Matthias?
Thank you very much, Richard. Of course, let me support and add my voice to all developing countries that have very eloquently articulated our principal position from the G77, which is the SHARM language talks about eligibility for all developing countries. I couldn't have said it better and very elegantly as my colleague from GRULIC, Angela, has said, on the very fact that we should not be in a position to design a fund of any sort that leaves any developing country behind. This is a matter of priority for all G77, and we are not going to move from that position, just to be very clear. Pakistan has very eloquently and elegantly highlighted the fact that the prioritization that some here in this room are trying to make does not make any sense, because all developing countries are suffering and will be suffering losses and damages caused by the adverse effects of climate change. And this fund, if it needs to be up to the challenge that we all agreed in Egypt, it needs to recognize that in eligibility criteria. And it's very concerning to me, Richard and Uti, to see that around this room, it seems that we are approaching this prioritization with different weights and different approaches. Because I also hear from my SEEDS and LDC colleagues that they do not want the model that those countries are pushing for, and this is being disregarded. So aren't you paying lip service when you are pushing for this prioritization? Are you really listening to our SEEDS and LDC colleagues when we are designing this fund? When they're clearly saying that they do not want the World Bank model, that the World Bank model does not fit their needs? So it seems really confusing to me to see that they want this reflected in the eligibility criteria. And I entirely agree with you, Richard, that there may be also a confusion when it comes to the structure of this very decision. Here we're talking about eligibility. It's about what we agreed in SHARM, not necessarily on allocation and access modalities. I agree with you, and we can support you on your way forward, because on that specifically, we're going to come back and be bold, as I said yesterday, on SEEDS and LDCs, which are part of our constituency, G77, and needs due consideration for their specific needs and national circumstances. So just, I took the floor really to stress and add my voice to our developing country colleagues on that specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. I sense your frustration, and I equally share it, as many of our colleagues do. So thank you. Next is Hannah.
Thank you very much, co-chairs. Let me start by thank you for your flexibility in trying different modalities. I think the call to enter into this modality is another pitch for colleagues to make progress in this meeting, which to us indicates that there continues to be a political will to progress in this meeting, and I think that's shared around the table, so I'd like to start off with that, and also, of course, with commending the co-chairs in your overall approach and your leadership of bringing us to consensus. To us, I think there's a clear need to deliver on COP27's promise of operationalizing the fund in Dubai. And for that, we continue to encourage the Transitional Committee and to want to be active players within this committee to provide what would be ambitious recommendations and to provide them by consensus. So with that in mind, I would frankly suggest that we start where we already have consensus. I think that there's a concrete proposal on the table to go ahead with eligibility as the area that we have consensus from in SHARM, with language that we have consensus from in SHARM. And I would really appreciate feedback on whether we can agree to that and then speak about allocation specifically. I think Jean-Christophe, you already mentioned there were a couple of things that we can work on to give guidance to the board, whether it's triggers, whether it's how to approach programmatic approaches, and that's guidance that we need to give them to be able to do their work and to be able to deliver in a way that meets the expectations of, frankly, the world. I think that all our colleagues from across the world have participated in the identification of gaps exercise. I think it's very clear that those gaps are not limited as much as everyone appreciates the extreme circumstances that LDCs and SIDS are under. We absolutely appreciate that. However, the gaps identified went beyond that. So I think it's a concrete suggestion to agree to eligibility as of SHARM language and work on the basis of allocation. And work then on floors and ceilings and all aspects of the room to be able to bring it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you for supporting my proposal on this one. Next on my list is Debbie, and then I'll come back to the colleagues that have already spoken. So Debbie, please go ahead.
Thank you, Richard. I simply wanted to come in to support Georg's suggestion that we might need a change in working modality if we're starting to get stuck, given that we've got 1.5 days left. I'm not counting working through the night tomorrow night, but I'm really conscious that colleagues may need time to go back to their capitals, and I am therefore worried that the possibility of a full package might be slipping out of sight. So I just sort of want to give strength to your elbow as co-chairs to help us think about options for working, possibly in small groups, and also to give you time with the Secretariat to work on bridging text. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. As I said, Uti and I will reflect on lunch on how to proceed. Thank you. Mohammed and Heike, I'm not sure, is your flag up? Or okay, so Mohammed, Heike and then Mohammed.
Sorry, thank you, co-chairs. And I also fully support the proposal by Georg that let us get back to really technical and text work, and please, co-chairs, guide us in that. We heard some things that we can work on then jointly, but I must also say that I started out, from my perspective, with showing flexibility under really struggling under the terms and questioning also the co-chair of what are the terms in which we bracket the text. But then I heard from colleagues and co-chair language on agreeing on this now, and that was not the condition or the assumption in good faith that I got with the insurance from co-chair. So I just want to reiterate that what I said before is still true. It's a system, there are different elements, and therefore, again, the proposal by Georg really to look at the text and get us working on concrete solutions would be helpful. And one last remark, because I didn't think it came up already strongly on most input before on how we look at every human being on the planet. And of course, you heard me talking about human rights-based approach, so all humans are, of course, equal. And that is an important foundation for all of us, and I thought all of us engage with this sentiment. The capacity of countries to deal with loss and damage, that is not equal. And I think this is a bit the variation we have also to capture within our mandate. And I think that point is, for our seat at least, important. Thank you.
Thank you, Heike. Again, maybe we're not understanding each other here. I was very clear that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. I was just simply trying to make progress on one thing because we have language and charm, and so my reflections to agree to my proposal was that we would focus only on proposal 1 text. We would then consider the other issues around LDCs and SIDS and vulnerability in other places. I was not suggesting that we now had something that we could agree upon as in like done, finished, right? Because by agreeing to ensure that the other issues are taken up elsewhere means that I have to give you the flexibility that if it's not resolved there, that you may wish to come back on it. So, we're trying to make progress, but it seems it's very difficult in this modality because I don't know why, but anyway, we'll continue to try. We'll continue to fail, and we'll continue to try again. That's what makes us resilient as developing countries. Thank you very much. Mohammed, you're my last speaker, and then I'm breaking for lunch.
Thank you so much. And quickly, when it comes to eligibility, I don't see any linkage between the eligibility and the allocation and the 3 elements that you have mentioned. Eligibility is a standalone item. And it's very clear that eligibility has clearly agreed less than or like 8 months, 10 months ago. And if some colleagues want to redefine eligibility because they didn't get what they wanted in Sharm, this is not the place to do it. Please go in the COP and the CMA and try to do it there. This is the first point. Same applies to the idea of priority in generic form. Priority in generic form, again, gives the same, it applies the same thing, which is you have categorization of human beings, which will not support, and it doesn't make sense. Giving due consideration and operationalizing the consideration of the specific needs and circumstances of the SIDS and the LDCs is one thing, but reflecting it in using eligibility or using the term priority, this gives a total wrong impression and total wrong message. And for any normal human being to read that eligibility is, we are giving a priority for some over others, although they are all impacted by the same climate impacts, doesn't give the right messaging. My third point, again, was we heard from same colleagues that they wanted the World Bank, and it was very clear from our colleagues from the SIDS and LDCs, the World Bank is not an option that caters for them. So either we have a coherent, clear position, or we play it within the different paragraphs just to suit our what we want to bring forward. And we don't want to go in this direction. We have 1.5 days to finish, and I think bringing those issues now and putting them in the wrong place and in the wrong line of discussion with the wrong terminology will not take us anywhere. Final point, co-chairs, we have been here for 3 days. I'm happy that I have been hosting you all for more than 3 days. And we gave you 2 times we gave you a mandate to come back with text, and you didn't. So if we are going to give you a mandate to come back with text, you have to come back with text. And if there are specific elements between the representation of the constituencies, I think you, as co-chairs, you should separate yourself from the positions of the constituencies and work for the bigger picture, for the better option, by having an outcome that reflects the concerns and reflects the magnitude of the situation, rather than a very narrow political or economic or definition or prioritization issue. So just to be very clear on that. But to respond to colleagues who said that go back and do work, we have tried that for the past 3 days. We were enjoying our time outside. I don't know what was happening in your room and why didn't you come back with text. I will not ask that. But if we give you another mandate, you have to come back with something. Thank you.
I'm just wondering whether I can change my airplane ticket and leave now. Anyway, thank you, Mohammed. We'll reflect on whether we can do that. I must be flexible. You were going to. Okay, thank you, Jean-Christophe.
Well, thank you, Richard. As I said, and I think we are on the same line with Jaime and Heike, it's mainly a question of process. So we are ready to be flexible and to agree on bracketing 2 and 3 if we can address allocation right now. this is a process. So we want to have to go through the different elements that Jaime and Heike mentioned, as well as I. So let's bracket 2 and 3 and go to allocation after the lunch, I guess.
Okay, Jean-Christophe, so I don't know if that's being flexible. I think that's more being demanding. That, like, in order for you to show flexibility, you want something in return. And that's a structural thing. It's not like you're giving me anything else. So I'm not quite sure I can off the mark agree with that, because that would then just promote bad behavior by the rest of the group. And as you know, I'm very frustrated by the bad behavior, particularly the suggestions that have come from you and Mr. Higgins about 3-year board chair terms, right? I'm like really worried about you guys. Anyway, I'm going to break for lunch. Uti and I will consider that. Thank you for that proposal. If we do agree to your proposal, it's on an exceptional basis, and we will not do it again. It certainly doesn't encourage bad behavior, but we'll consider that on during lunchtime. So, Mohammed, do you want to come back?
Yes, I'm very clear. Eligibility is not linked to any allocation or anything. Eligibility is different than allocation. If we package them together, then we're packaging everything in this document together. Then let's discuss World Bank out, and let's focus only on a standalone fund. Let's be very clear on that, because we heard from our colleagues from the SIDS saying that the World Bank doesn't help them, it doesn't deliver. So let's agree now. World Bank is out, and then we discuss. Then we are creating a standalone fund. And let's work on that. So if you start packaging things that are not related, then we are in a different pathway. Eligibility is totally different than allocation and other things. And I don't like this packaging thing. If we do it, if we go this path, it will be like very difficult that we move forward on things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. So as I said before, I have not decided on the proposal from Jean-Christophe. I'd given an indication that I was not entirely happy with it, but that Uti and I would discuss it after lunch. Our intention has always been to go through the text. I have colleagues that have had issues have important issues for them in paragraph 3. I had made a suggestion on how we would deal with that. I have not agreed in any form to change the order of our work. I said I would reflect on it with Uti and come back after lunch on that one, and I still intend to do that. So thank you very much for that strong reminder. And now I'm going to break for lunch, and we'll come back at 2:15. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good lunch. Thank you. Mohammed. Mohammed.